I should have more green. I got green shorts on, but I don't want to stand up. They're kind of short, but
Yeah,
super excited to be here today, man. I'm glad you made it with your crazy weather, man.
yeah, it's no good here in the Midwest. Everybody's probably affected in some way, shape, or form with this storm, but man, it's brutal last night. So not good this morning. So we did have these grand plans for this. We were partnered with one of our close customers here in Omaha. We were going to go to this new Tech Hub Innovation Center that they had, and I was going to present from there live. Had this cool plan together, and well, Mother Nature, Old Man Winter decided they didn't want to do that. So it's been uh, it's been rough winter wise every time I tried to make it over there, and it was no different today. So we had this blizzard warning come through here in Omaha, not good. So luckily my power is still on. My mom's just came on this morning, so I'm good right now. I got buried fiber, so hopefully I'm in a good spot. Yeah, it's no good. But a little bit about us. So we try to we've many times in the past we haven't really talked too much about like what we do for fun and these kind of things, but we have our logos there. Obviously, anybody that knows me, Detroit Lions, that's probably the number one thing you know about me. Anybody who's ever spoke to me a couple times are familiar with me being a huge Lions fan. Yankees for baseball since I was a kid, huge baseball fan. And obviously, you can't grow up here in Omaha in the 80s and 90s and not be a Cornhusker fan. So, yeah, Nebraska is just through and through in my blood. And then I'm a big follower of the international USA Soccer. So that's big for me. From a technology side, I just knew the minute on the new NVIDIA Enterprise Advisor community badge that they have there, and Nutanix NTC, and then of course Azure Solutions Architect and AVD Specialist, which plays directly into what we're talking about today. Now, a little bit personal on the pictures here. Let's do a little different here of the pictures. So we went to our happy place again here last year in Hawaii. This was Kauai for any of you that have been there. I know Dana has. But we went hiking. We took snapped this pic here, but it's really our happy place in Hawaii. We've been there quite a few times on the different islands, me and the family. So it's where we enjoy going. We might do the Big Island next. And then the next one right next to that is my daughter Hannah. Recent pic with our since the last time on our new fluffy cat. She's a ragamuffin, so I'm told it's all hair and fluff, and she's not fat. But that picture is pretty funny to me. So that's our kind of our new. Not been with us now a couple of years, but she found us, started living under our deck, and now we have a cat.
I'm gonna
And
use that same excuse. It's all hair and fluff, not fat for me too. So
don't know if it plays the same, but you can give that a shot. And the bottom one's kind of a fun one from our all team, our big wig weekend together that we had at Choice Solutions at that same place that you saw that pic that Dana had up. A few of us, our families, Nikki, Shane's brother-in-law there. Unfortunately, Dawn's not in the picture, but our families, we took a nice pic in the foyer there. So that's me and my family, and then we're having a good time. And so, yeah.
awesome, and stellar intro. So yeah, so Shane Kleiner, it's a good to meet everybody. Good to see everybody again. Thanks for joining. So I guess a little bit about myself. So I wasn't a sports fan until a couple of years ago. So not a through and through sports guy, but I've been slowly getting into it. So got Dolphins being a native down here in Florida, and hockey on the Panthers side. Got the Stanley Cup last year. Pretty awesome with that.
Congratulations.
So thank you. Yeah, I actually got the game-winning puck right here. It's not a game-winning puck; it was a souvenir, but I happen to have it on the desk.
Same thing.
Yeah. So I watch a ton of TV. So that basically takes over for my certification. So I don't have all those fancy badges there, but I do have Netflix, which honestly, all those hours of TV, you can ask me anything you want on the Netflix and Apple TV side. Stellar show, by the way. Robert De Niro, Zero Day. Check it out. He didn't pay me for that. Just watch the last six episode. Awesome. It's about I don't want to go into it now, but
Yeah, I was about to
Zero
say
Day.
we only have 90 minutes for this.
Yeah, I was if I start going in, it would be problems. But but yeah, so Azure Solutions Architect, and same thing, Ozzy there on the virtual desktop side on Azure. We've both been in EUC for over or 25 plus years. It's our bread and butter. We've got a great boutique shop here at Choice. So a little bit about myself. So that's my wife Dawn there. So we've been married. That was our ninth anniversary there actually at Mother Wolf, amazing. Pasta restaurant over in Miami at Evan Funky's restaurant. If you've seen the chef special on Netflix, Chef Table on Noodles, that's his spot. And I got a mustache there, which actually was a fun thing I did
Mario.
for Mario. I had that for what, 3 months? I almost kept it going and just kind of went away. It was like just a new me there. It might come back. We'll see. So yeah, it's my wife Dawn there, and then we got our dog Gus. So you could see we just moved into a new place, a year and a half almost of renovations. So super excited about that. That's actually our dog Gus there, getting his FedEx Chewy delivery. So he's super excited about that. That was a lot of fun. Gonna submit that to Chewy for an ad, maybe get him signed up. And then that's me barbecuing. I like barbecue and I like cooking in the new place, the background there, and that's our dog Gus with his favorite toy is turkey.
Yeah,
So
I want
yeah,
to point out you're wearing Crocs in that picture there, waiting for the FedEx.
listen, so those shoes, there's a story behind that. I don't normally wear the Crocs. Okay, there was a flood situation, Dania Beach, Florida. We had no shoes. I went into the Nike store. I needed those. I got them. I know.
Hey,
I
you
don't
know,
normally wear those kind of shoes,
you
but
gotta
they
do,
are very
you gotta do it.
comfortable, by the way. I'm not gonna lie.
You gotta do
So,
what you do. Yeah,
so cool. Well, yeah, excited for everybody, and thank you. Ready to rock and roll. We got a lot of great stuff for y'all today.
yeah. And then, on the community side, we're a big proponent. Anybody that knows us and Choice Solutions of the community in general, right? Until Citrix just disbanded their CUGCs, we had three of us leading CUGCs at the time. Ray Davis there in the middle at the podium doing his lightning round at the
Right,
UC.
right.
That's right, Ray at the UC World last year on Teams. He also is starting off doing the World VUC meetups in Jacksonville down there. Shane and myself, we do the Nutanix user groups and lead those in our it's just community time with all you guys in our respective areas. And then we're the only channel partner, channel sponsor of the World of EUC right now, which we're very proud to say that. So we
100%.
put a
Actually
lot.
rocking the World AUC logo today,
Oh
supporting
yeah,
the community. Yeah.
nice. So Ray and myself for sure will be at the next one coming up here in Minneapolis this year. But yeah, we've always been big on the community side and doing our part. Right. So I was lucky enough to have the 500th Nutanix user group here in Omaha.
Nice.
Me and my co-lead Steve Elgin here. We had our 500th meeting, which is pretty cool. We took some pictures with the t-shirts and whatnot. So yeah, yeah.
Congrats,
So
man.
the UC stack, right? That leads us into this. And Shane, I'll let you kind of go into this a little bit, but we got a
Yeah,
lot
for
of
sure.
yeah.
Yeah, it's something that's kind of grown over time, and this is kind of our stack from an end user computing perspective of kind of the solutions that we have, a great deal of deep expertise in, and you'll notice one of the first things there is ControlUp One platform kind of wrapped around the whole stack, and we're going to talk about the observability digital employee experience a little bit at a high level, kind of weave through the presentation about the insights and data that comes through the entire stack when we talk through EUC and why that's so important and why we have it wrapped around the stack. But at the presentation layer, again, EUC is kind of our expertise for 25 plus years. Company's been around for close to 40, and very heavily focused on Citrix. So originally we're boutique Citrix focused. And I'd say over the last, 4 years now, we've really expanded that. And obviously, been some crazy changes over Citrix, and we've done webinars through all that and what's going on. And so, with that, and with them really focusing in, and we saw the kind of writing on the wall and the focusing in on those, top 3,000 customers, it really made sense for us to kind of shift from just a Citrix focused practice to really expand our horizons, right? And no pun intended, you'll notice for but look towards Azure Virtual Desktop, right, with the extension and growth there on Azure, as well as Windows 365 Cloud PC, and then we'll talk today about Nerdio about that kind of enterprise extension that's a wrapper around AVD. So that's been a really heavy focus. And then Parallels as well, kind of expanding in an alternative solution to Citrix, just on the EUC side, folks that maybe aren't in Azure, maybe more on premises, or could also be in Azure as well. And then you'll see Amazon Workspaces there. And that's really about kind of leveraging, Amazon Workspaces delivered via,
Or
Citrix, and
yeah,
yep. And that's something that you'll notice, Windows 360, or sorry, Office 365, right? Can't run native on Windows 10, Windows 11, outside of Azure until recently. Was it last year, right? It was an announcement with Amazon Workspaces, and that's how, and that's similar on the cloud PC as far as like, price per user and that sort of thing. And so we basically started getting into that where it's front ended through HDX Plus. So we'll talk to that later. And then kind of the question mark, because we're also evaluating next gen kind of EUC platforms that are out there. And we're going to be slowly kind of bringing into the stack to kind of help fill that gap for where, Citrix, maybe smaller shops, 2000 and below, maybe looking to move away from that Citrix side.
yeah, I will say this is always changing, right? As you know,
Yeah.
if you've been to any of ours. We last time we had a focus. We've also talked on AVD Cloud PC previously, but we also, now that we're fully on board as a partner on the parallel side, like you mentioned, we had a big
Yeah.
was really digging into and talking a lot on the parallel side for last few presentations we've done different areas there. And then, like you said, that question mark. Like this year, we fully expect, like, Omnis is probably going to pop in there for us, right? So we're always keeping our finger on the pulse of what's going on and what's hot and what we need to get into based on customer needs. And so this is changing every year, and we're always going to make sure that we're on top of the what matters to you guys.
Yeah, I think that's kind of unique for us, as we talk to this, is like being an agile and not being a massive organization, right? And deep ties to all the different, partners allows us to be agile, right? And kind of grow and adapt, with the market. And so that's what we've done as we kind of move down the stack, right? As you look at, obviously, Oz, you've been talked to NVIDIA there for a second. I mean, you've been really an NVIDIA kind of champion for the last, 8+ years, right?
Yeah.
When you look at, growing on the EUC side there.
Yep. Yeah. And obviously, NVIDIA now is everything and about AI, but from an EUC perspective, that was all them, right? It was gaming and EUC. And so NVIDIA is huge in that space of EUC and graphics, right? So we're a specialist for EUC and graphical workloads, graphics heavy workloads. So it's definitely something we're proud of there as well. And one of the few that can do it and do it well. So yeah, so NVIDIA, and then you got the other players here, Turbo, Liquid, or that packaging side of things, Numescent, we're just getting started with. So, that's a very interesting part of EUC with that packaging. Then obviously the Azure, Nutanix, and Zen Server. Yes, we're having to dust off our Zen Server skills. We as Choice Solutions used to do a ton in the Zen Server space, and then it kind of dropped off, as everybody knows. Sort of came back because of the Broadcom situation. So we got that on there. And then, of course, the endpoint side of things. But like I said, this is always changing. There might be a different logo on here, something new. So, yeah. And then ControlUp One wrapped around it all, right, Shane? So,
Yep.
yep. And I did want to mention, so you'll notice a theme, right? So we've tried to keep these fun. And so every time we always have some holiday approaching, right? So March 17th is coming for this one. So you probably noticed we got some St. Patrick's Day theme going on here for our slides. So Ellie's great. She does great on the logo, changes up our logo to the different colors. We make it fun based on what we're rolling into, right? So quick fact, I didn't really realize myself, but St. Patty, he was not from Ireland. He was from Great Britain, I guess.
Did not know that.
He was British. So
Yeah.
there you go.
British.
That there's a lot of history behind it before we start having just pub crawls on March 17th. So yeah, well, so what's our agenda today? Obviously, we're focused only today on Cloud PC, W365, W365 Enterprise to be specific. W365 has a business side. This is just a turnkey. Put in your credit card number you're moving on.
Like on the enterprise management capabilities.
Yeah, it doesn't play into the story of here. That's more really small business type stuff. Really small. almost personal type stuff, right? For that. So W365 Enterprise / Cloud PC. So 365 Enterprise is the SKU, and then Cloud PC is like the PC, right? So that's like your desktop. So that's why we have the slash there. We kind of use interchangeably sometimes, but just know that W365 Enterprise, that's the SKU that you would purchase. So, how does that differ from AVD? We're going to talk to that, the architecture scenarios, lifecycle management, touch on that, DR, business continuity, patching, observability, and then have some at the end. We're going to get down to some scenarios and a real world cost breakdown that we just did recently. And then there's always bonus material, right? We're splashing in Nerdio in here, and we'll tell you a little bit about why throughout the presentation. But we always have bonus fun stuff, right? So, yeah. So, I mean, the first thing is, what's really driving this discussion forward? So, as you're on here, like, why am I looking to these new DAS solutions? These from my previous solution. A lot of you may be Citrix already, for example, right? Some may be Omnissa, I don't know, but what's kind of driving it forward? Citrix and Broadcom, in short, and these two kind of go together, right? So the moves that they made, and then the licensing shakeups, for example, on the Citrix side, also on the Broadcom side with the VMware stuff, but these two changes alone were a tsunami for all of these, like the discussions going forward, and what are my options? Citrix doing what they're doing, Broadcom doing what they're doing, more leading into the infrastructure pieces, but they kind of go hand in hand. These are two big ones in our world over the last couple of years, right? So cloud first mentality. I mean, Shane, and we're seeing it everywhere, right? I mean, really, when it comes to leadership, it's like, how can I go cloud first? And when you think cloud first in the UC, that's what Cloud PC and AVD are, right? So from that, even if we don't really play in that, but even if it's AVD, for example, on Azure Local, formerly Azure Stack is underneath that on-prem, that's still all driven, managed via Azure Arc. It's a cloud first mentality. So that cloud first mentality from leadership across the board has been pushing this forward. So that's always going to be a driving factor from that standpoint. And then obviously Win 10, it's dying off this year. Everybody's getting ready for this. And what's an easy way to get ready for this? I got to move to Windows 11. I got all these changes from Citrix happening right now and all these things going on. How can I get to an optimized image in Windows 11? And, I got to move there anyway and change up my image. Well, Cloud PC and AVD, you can start with an optimized Azure image right out of the gates. And that can be like, propel you in that Windows 11 strategic play that you got to do there and get ready, for the October end of life. So obviously the Win 10 and Win 11 is a big one going on right now. M365, Microsoft just keeps adding more features into their entitlements, which kind of plays into one that's coming up here. And I'll just throw these out there as the Azure momentum. So Microsoft in the EUC world and Azure, hand in hand, they're licensed. They have the upper hand in the cloud space. There's no
One
doubt.
might say they stalled the market till they were ready to rock and roll, right? But they've just done some incredible work, though.
They're doing what they got to do, and they're doing it right. But that's really propelling Azure for the growth on the Azure side versus what AWS was. They keep closing the gap, and it's really a big part. It's Windows and EUC and the stuff like Windows 11 multi-session and AVD and Cloud. All this stuff is Azure focused, and they own Windows. They own Office 365. They own the tools that we use on a daily basis for 90-something% of us, right? So that propels the hybrid cloud story, Azure momentum, and then just the modern, quote unquote, modern identity and device management, right? Intune. I want modern management, right? So
that's been a huge one too. Is like you're seeing the transition to modern identity going towards Entra. and at the same time seeing, a convergence of what was originally, the System Center stuff and the Intune, traditional group policies and, Intune policies all kind of going like this and converging. And that's where we'll talk later around like application packaging and why those things are even more important when you want that same package across both estates, right? And that kind of hybrid environment. So,
Yep.
yeah.
So now's the time where we pull out our phones, like usual. We got three multiple choice questions here. We want to get some voting going on here. It's always fun seeing what the results are. Pull out your phone. If you don't have a smartphone, well, sorry. I fully think everybody should. So, scan the QR code there and start voting here. Shane, I'll let you probably vote too, but
I don't want to skew the results, Oz, but
that's
I'll
true.
just take
Make sure it's
take
working.
a quick. Although I am a cloud PC user, so
We're going to give it a full minute here, or at least 30, 45 seconds. So
Citrix.
let me scroll down here to what we got going on. We got Nerdio down here at 9.
Should have added one. Which one are you planning on leaving in the next year? I might skew that the other way. I don't know. No, I mean we'll talk. Obviously Citrix isn't the main focus today, but we'll be weaved through a little bit.
So this is interesting. 20%, like this bouncing around here on the 20%, 21, like right here, and none of the above, just figuring out what's what.
It's honestly a great kind of an interesting place to be, right? When you have this much change and this seismic shift in the market, you got renewals coming up, like you said, 10 to 11, right? This is the time to kind of make that change, make that transition. So we hope that everyone today kind of can walk away having a great understanding of AVD, Cloud PC, what makes sense, kind of where, and that's really what we're going to drive into.
Very cool.
Yeah, that's interesting to see that Cloud PC right under there on the Citrix side.
Yep. So if
Bro, I was Raz charting through.
are you familiar with Nerdio as well? So
Yeah, Nerdia really goes, and we'll get into it, but hand in hand on the AVD side.
look at
So,
that, we're tied. Look at that.
oh boy,
Right.
someone's got to
Plays,
do that.
plays in today's webinar, so that's good. So we'll go to our next question here.
Yeah,
Where are
tied
you?
because I didn't vote, Oz. I could have broke the tie.
I know, sorry. All right, so the public cloud story. Where are you? Are you looking? Do you have something going on with an Azure landing zone on the Microsoft side? All on-prem, doing anything with Entra ID, just in general, which is going to be a lot of you, I would think, right? So this is a multiple choice. You don't just get one choice. You can do multiples for your situation.
Yeah, it's interesting too. And at the end, we'll talk through like past webinars and stuff, our page and where they're located. But our last webinar, we really went into kind of what makes sense, where, and why. And it kind of helps to drive like when we kind of talk through like driving through those decisions. What are the questions to ask? And this really helps with that, right? Is it's like, well, if you're mostly on-prem, you don't have any Azure footprint. Well,
Yep.
maybe it doesn't make sense, or maybe certain use cases like contractors or temp workers make sense, and so
Right.
that was a really good one. So we're
Yeah.
moving up on the
So this is
still hybrid makes that's where we feel typically you're seeing that on the
yep.
rise, which makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, a
Yeah,
little bit of multi-cloud. We're seeing that more and more. AWS
that
might
is 100% a
non
conversation.
EUC, right? Maybe not as EUC Windows focused licensing over there and all that, but maybe other stuff. And then Azure is the EUC focus. So give that 10 more seconds here. And we'll go to our last question. Cool. Yeah, this does exactly. I mean, this
Makes sense. Entra being the in the lead there, obviously, is
one,
kind of the front door on the identity side.
most, yeah. If you're
It's
doing
really the
anything,
bridge, right? It came from
yeah,
Office
that's
365 with the
usually the
tenant. Yeah.
first thing, right? Is enter for M360, O365, any of that stuff, you need it. So, all right, then we got our tie. So we'll move to the last question here. Very interesting. Last one, what's target use case? Contractors, developers, just general purpose, general users, remote users.
Yeah,
Shift
I love the
worker.
pictures you added in here.
A
Reminds me of those like little golden chocolates.
little bit of spilled golden chocolate there.
Contractor, man, I tell you what, that is the absolute perfect use case for cloud PC. So
Yeah.
think of all those contractors, right? And the logistics around getting those laptops provisioned, handing them out, shipping them out. This is it's really a great story.
Yeah, this one here is where the GPU focus, which Cloud PC has a GPU SKU as well, a few of them.
Interesting. Yeah, developers too. I mean, I'll tell you what. Yeah, I mean, remote makes a lot of sense,
Developers,
right?
Microsoft even has their dev box, right? Or whatever. We
Yeah.
haven't done a whole lot of that, but it's obviously very specific around developers for that.
Shift work. Excited. We'll talk a little bit about Windows
Plays
365 here in a second. We're gonna really
plays
peel
in
back
front
that
line.
onion, and
Yep.
we're gonna talk to shift work and where that makes sense. Sweet. Yeah, that's good. I mean, this all is in line. Here we
Yep.
go.
So here we go. We got splashes of everything on here, right? So AI helped us with this one, of course.
Shit, man. You gotta admit when you use the AI, makes
It's
sense. It's
obvious,
our
but it's fun, right? So we got a little bit
Can
there.
tell by the words, they're always
Yeah.
like a little messed up for now, but awesome. So yeah, let's rock and roll. We're gonna kick it off here. We're all revved up, ramped up. Suspense is building. So let's talk about Windows 365 Cloud PC. So the first thing, as you know, you've probably seen is I don't know if you've seen 2014 came out, Gartner report, desktop as a service. Microsoft just shooting top right there as a market leader, and one might say, well, how is that possible? How do you jump ahead of where Citrix was or Amnissa at the time, right? And really, it's around just the sheer volume of growth that they've had on the cloud PC side. Also, if you dig into that report, they're saying desktops as a service, really looking at like pay per user per month, a little bit different than Citrix is really when you talk about DAS, you're talking about a control plane, a NISA control plane, right? And we'll talk about it here in a second. And Windows 365 is really a SaaS platform, and that's really the huge difference between Azure Virtual Desktop, Windows 365. We're talking SaaS, right? We're talking similar to Microsoft 365, Office 365, right? You have basically SKUs. These are t-shirt sizes, SKUs that you choose from, right? So again, as Oz mentioned, we're not going to go into business. We're really going to focus. That's a new word. Focus
You always have
on
one of those once
enterprise.
in a while.
Yeah,
I
it just
like
happens. We're going
it.
to focus on CPC enterprise as well as CPC frontline for shift work, and then we're going to also talk about the new shared model as well today. That's in tech preview. So when you look at Windows 365 Cloud PC, it's transparent. There's no story here, and this one gets a discount. You go here, it's all on the website, right? There's a wide menu, but it's very fixed, right? It's 2 vCPU, 4, 8, 16. You'll see the RAM is very fixed. You do have different options from a storage standpoint. And then there's basically monthly pricing. Again, this is per user per month. If you're a larger customer, potentially there's some discounts, and Microsoft obviously works with you on this sort of stuff. When it comes to the pricing. But the idea here is keep in mind the flexibility here is a little limited. But these are dedicated today. We'll talk about the different models, but on 24/7, right? And that's a big difference. So the other piece here is for $5 extra a month, and we're going to really drive into this. You're getting cross-regional DR for $5, right? And there's even a new option that's even a shorter RPO. But when you look at frontline, really it's about shift work, and the feature parity is not there. And so we'll talk about that as well. But again, just the takeaway here is on the CPC side is SKU based. And so with that, there's also use cases around GPU. So there's an enterprise, Windows 365 enterprise. So for those CAD users, those high graphical intense users, you're looking at a standard, a super, and a max. And you'll notice across the board the frame buffer really from a GPU perspective is important, right? 8, 12, or 16. And you'll notice what's in blue is really important. It says variable. We've recently experienced this on a project. Customers, working on a proof of concept at Jumpstart we'll talk about later. And they basically had the standard SKU, which was 4 by 16 by 8. And when they actually got their desktop, it was, much larger, right? It was a 12 vCPUs, 128 gigs of RAM, but still that 8 gig frame buffer. And the reason for that is the variables in the SKUs and the availability, they're guaranteeing you the minimums, but you might get something better. And
Very
so once they
interesting.
got it, they're like, we're not letting this go.
Yep.
But that's something that is key there is from a GPU perspective because there are different GPU cards. You're going to get at least the minimum, which is important to call out there.
It's very interesting to me because you could have one user get the big dog and another user just get the minimum.
Yeah, and that's one of those where you like hide the task manager, right? You don't want them showing off like, "Hey, Fred, come look at my desktop over here." It's
Yeah.
like that's like we want to app mask that task manager. We do not want them seeing like going around.
Yeah. Fun fact,
That's
these
a
are all based on Microsoft's, if you're curious, the A10s. So there's A10 based instances in Azure,
Mhm.
not the older T4 models of the GPUs. These are all based
Yep.
on.
Yep. And we'll dive into the architecture a little more, but I just want to point out from the Windows 365 perspective, it does ride on the Azure Virtual Desktop control plane, right? So it's using the Azure Virtual Desktop control plane service, so the gateway broker functionality, but there's newer, same clients, right? It's the remote desktop client, the Windows app client, all that's still the same. Really, the big difference, and you'll notice from a Windows 365 perspective as a service, those PCs are not in your tenant. They're not in your subscription. They're managed. They're there from a Microsoft's perspective. They're in their tenant. They're managing them, right? And then the networking side, which we're going to break down. I don't want to spoil it here, but we have a Microsoft hosted network option. True zero trust, zero integration to your existing subscriptions, and ANC where we have kind of a nick in your subscription and allowing you to extend to on-prem and giving you a lot more capabilities. But it is important to know it does sit on top of the AVD service, but it is again a SaaS service with additional services like the capacity and regional management, provisioning service, et cetera.
Yeah. And then driving into this, right? Just a real quick,
This is
AVD,
important.
Azure Virtual Desktop, just a little backstory. It used to be Windows Virtual Desktop back in the day. It's Azure Virtual Desktop. Sometimes that's used interchangeably. For those of you that are Citrix, you might be doing Citrix on Azure. That's Citrix on Azure. It is not AVD when you're doing Citrix and hooking into Azure and brokering to a desktop in Azure with your entitlements for M365. So there is a difference there. That's Citrix on Azure. AVD is their control plane, their PaaS services. That only Microsoft can use AVD. Now, as Shane mentioned, Cloud PC, W365, that's all based on the AVD control plane. So AVD is was WVD, so that was their first, and then now Cloud PC is the newer stuff that they have here. So AVD just a little different. Ultimate flexibility. It's got everything you could think of, right? So when you want flexibility, not those T-shirt sizes, that Shane was mentioning here a bit ago, that's AVD. That's like what you can do in Citrix or Parallels, any of these, where you can dictate like on-prem what you want specifically. Now you are Azure only in the case that we're talking about. If you're in Azure, so you are dictated by the instances that you have in Azure, but that is way more than Cloud PC is those fixed price SKUs that you saw earlier, right? So you can do the pooled model. Now, just FYI, there's not really a non-persistent like in the Citrix world. It's pooled. And then they have a persistent model, which is their personal host pools. You can pay as you go, 1 year, 3 year reserve. So there's a lot of fun stuff you can do on the pricing based on how many you're going to have up and running all the time. It has a remote app and desktop, so the seamless application sides there with remote app or desktop. You can do client OS, server OS. Client OS side, you can do single session, multi-session, so you can do any and all of those if you want. Do you have to have architect knowledge, right? So you got to build work with us or build a landing zone. You got to design it out properly. Just if you were doing like something on like Citrix on Azure or any of these others on Azure, you got to have your EUC landing zone ready to go, tied into your hub, your trends, basically all of that stuff, your hub and spoke, and everything's got to be laid out and secured and governance and everything's got to be there. You control it through the Azure portal. We're going to talk about Nerdio. That's where it's very limited from an Azure portal perspective in the AVD blade. Again, highly customized, any supported instance size in the regions. So it's all based on regional instance availability and what you can do. There's that's again that maximum flexibility. FS logics from a personalization standpoint, and then the storage options ties into Azure NetApp services, Azure Files, the manual backup duplication. If you got personal ASR, all that kind of stuff you're responsible for in this world. So you can do hibernation with this to help save on costs, and then it does have built-in scaling plans native to AVD. Dynamic auto scaling with Nerdio as well that we'll talk to, but quite a bit different. And we're only pointing out like mainly differences here on these slides, not like all the features that come with each one, but something different.
Yep. Yeah. So on the Windows 365 side, on the Cloud PC side, again, fixed SKUs per user per month on 24/7. As Oz mentioned on his scenario, a lot more flexibility there. But in our case, 24/7, it's nice to be able to always access your desktop. Think of it like, if we're just talking the dedicated model, like you handed someone a laptop, you're handing that contractor a laptop for all intents and purposes. It's on 24/7, right? Full SaaS, it's 100%, it's SLA backed. It's 99.99% SLA for the Windows 365 service. The management service, the management control plane's got it's got a 6-hour RTO with RPO of 30 minutes. It's 11 nines on the data resiliency side. And there's automated in-zone resiliency, right? So if anything goes down within those zones, availability zones are a concept within Azure, a construct essentially. We have 3 data centers, certain regions support them within in a small geographical area, and then all that. Typically, if we were in the world of on the AVD side, we have to design for that, right? And this is all handled by Microsoft. You're not worrying about networking. You do if you go into the ANC side, Azure Network Connection. We'll talk about that later, but the idea is it's 100% managed by Microsoft. You don't have to think about these things. Regional DR, right? Basically for an extra $5, whole nother region. And we'll talk about what that looks like here shortly. Simplified management, right? Automated integration with Intune. So very similar to like Autopilot. When you create that provisioning policy, you assign that user to the Entra group, it will automatically provision that Cloud PC and it'll be managed by Intune integrated. Keep note here, Windows 10, Windows 11 only, right? We're not able to do, multi-session, server OS, right? Not possible today. And not possible to do multi-session Windows 11 or Windows 10. It's single session only. Built-in backup in DR. So things like you have to think about in the AVD world, like, are we doing snapshots? Are we doing backups? That's all baked in with user settings. You can give them, multiple snapshots, being able to do self-service restore. That's all basically part of the service. User screws up, they can basically reset their cloud PC, with a phone call. It can also be driven via the Graph APIs, which is pretty cool. Zero Trust by design with Microsoft Hosted Network. Oz is going to cover that, and I'll drive into the ANC side here shortly. Built-in e-discovery forensics mode, if they're from a security perspective, if a cloud PC has an incident, can actually kind of channel that off and have it kind of basically take that disk and drop it to a storage account for forensics purposes. You'd have to do all that manually on the AVD side. Shift work with Frontline. So Frontline license, we'll dig into that, but essentially that's one license. Pay for one license, 3 people can connect for the cost of one license. But obviously that's shift-based work. And a new tech preview we'll talk about as well, which is Frontline Shared, which is kind of that, giving that non-persistent model or pooled model with Cloud PC, which is pretty slick. So this gives you an idea of the differences, and we'll drive into the use cases as well here shortly.
Yep. And then, we're getting some questions. We're answering them as we go. We might talk to some later if we have time at the end, but just FYI there, trying to answer questions as we go.
Yeah, we'll try to weave it in, and if I get a second where you style, I'll try to answer them as well.
Yeah, so why Nerdio here, right? So you've heard us mention Nerdio. Nerdio is really that enterprise play for AVD. So Nerdio is not a separate DAS solution. Just know that Nerdio is an orchestration. So when you think of all the heavy lifting that MCS for that Citrix on Azure scenario, or any of these that we've like that orchestration engine about really integrating with the APIs natively and the features in Azure and doing special stuff for you, easily doing hardware templating and downgrading the disks, and when they're turned off and things like this. You don't have those native. There's a lot it's bare bones when you go native AVD from the portal. So Nerdio puts that full-blown enterprise class orchestration engine on top of AVD. It also integrates with Cloud PC as well. But so Nerdio is basically that go-to enterprise play here, right? So it optimized deployment management. For a while there's no scaling plans even in AVD. So Microsoft's playing catch up over there, putting like bare feature, like some of those features that are just necessary into the Azure portal. But unless you're a DevOps CI/CD fanatic, and if you're a bigger shop, I mean, if you're really small, you might be able to get away with AVD native and be fine with it. But once you see Nerdio and see what it can really do for you, that's where you realize what you'd be missing, right? So Shane coined it. It's the enterprise boost for AVD, right, Shane? So it gives you that the boost of capabilities, feature sets, all that stuff you would expect, especially if you're coming from something else like an Omnissa or a Citrix, where you had all these features with what it was able to do. And then you come over here and let's say you go AVD native, and you're like, crap, how do I do the policies? How do I do this easily? Where's my GUI for this? You're going to be missing things when you come over to the other side of the fence. Nerdio is what really helps with that. It helps provide that enterprise boost for you, right? Cost optimization, of AVD, auto scaling, of those resources. Like I said, a lot more options and granularity in there. The unified management now it has. They're constantly adding features to Nerdio, and when we talk about Nerdio here for us, it's Nerdio Manager for Enterprise, or NME. And so that's really why it comes into play.
Awesome. So yeah, when you talk through the and there's been a bunch of questions coming, I've just been kind of answering them. So I think everyone can see the answers, and I'll weave them in. Great questions about the service, about availability, about some setting around like default settings around user backup, and so we'll weave them in also as when we get to that section too. So keep them coming. Awesome stuff.
Wow. Yeah.
So yeah, architecture highlights, right? So there's two versions. There's NME, Nerdio for enterprise, and NMM. Say that 10 times fast. M&Ms, man, I would love some M&Ms right now. So MSP for managed services providers, right? So you have two options. So if you're an enterprise customer, you're going to go that route. If you're looking to be get managed by a service provider, something that we do as well. There's that route too. So one thing here is it's important is it's an Azure Marketplace deployment. So it's 100% automated, driven through the Azure Marketplace. So it's something that next click, and it will deploy. It's not like the traditional control planes that you're used to from Citrix, Omnissa, right, where it's all managed by them. They're essentially giving you PaaS, like platform as a service, right? So and we'll show you a diagram what that architecture looks like, but it's 100% automated. It's a one click. And essentially, there's basically, automated completely. So it's building out all those pieces for you. And then it's ready to get up and be managed. And so out of the box, to manage those PaaS solution basically, or components is around $250 a month to Azure Compute. And you need a minimum of 100 licenses to start. So the minimum to get on Nerdio platform is about $12.50 a month. That's something and you'll see why that essentially pays for itself with how they're saving you money with the cost optimizations around auto scale and things like that. Fully API driven, right? So this is something that goes directly. This is something that ties directly into the Azure APIs. You'll see that in kind of the diagram below. Those are the PaaS services there. App services, Azure SQL, automation, Key Vault, et cetera. All that essentially is kind of packaged together, and everything sits on top of AVD and Azure API. So if Nerdio goes down, you can still broker desktops, right? Think of it like an automation engine or the enterprise boost, as we were talking about. No lock-in, right? If Nerdio goes away, everything's built, right? It built your platform. What you would lose is that automated kind of scaling that's there. and some of the image management capabilities, but you could technically do that with a lot more manual effort later. One appliance it allows you one appliance, multiple tenants, multiple subscriptions, options, built-in RBAC, as well as in-zone resiliency in the later versions. But the big thing to mention here is it's not a broker, right? It's or a protocol. It sits right as an integration point with AVD, so it's leveraging RDP, right, from an AVD standpoint. It's an overlay.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. And, from an admin operational side of things, we can kind of go into these piece by piece a little bit. And Shane, I'll let you keep going here, but
Awesome. So admin or operational aspects, right? So we talked about the automated deployment. We talked about seamless interoperability with Azure and the ecosystem, right? So it's 100%, plug in. If you are a customer, a large enterprise with MCC commitments with Microsoft, you can essentially use that. Use that to fund, Nerdio there. So that's something that's possible. And intelligent auto scale, right? So being able to not just traditional like power them on, powering off, but being able to, actually scale session hosts, right? So based on memory, based on CPU and performance, build additional session hosts or, scale in those session hosts. And it does the imaging and provisioning and all that stuff as well, based on various, policies and configurations and schedules and things like that. And it does a great job at showing you how much you're saving, and it puts it front and center. It's probably one of the best products in the industry at showing you how much you're saving, which is great. It's not just the auto scale. Oz has a great video he's going to go through here in a little bit, but it's also optimizing things like swapping your disk out and doing things like that on the back end to save you costs. Things on around the AVD side on imaging is a little bit, cumbersome. Yeah, everything can be automated with like things like Terraform, but not everyone's a DevOps shop. And I've had large enterprises that are like, oh, we're going to do it all manually, and that's great. But then they have one or two DevOps guys, and those guys move on, and now you're left with a bunch of scripts, right? And this is something that makes it everyone an AVD administrator, right? App deployment policy management's built in, so you'll see a little bit about that later as well. There's something popped up here, Teams on the screen, notification or something.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, no worries.
So I thought they would put that on mute for us. We're in presentation mode, but keep going. It's not.
No, it's fine. Microsoft, Teams.
Yeah.
No, it's actually been better than Zoom lately. But yeah, so Azure AI integration, just like everything, that basically, everything on the Azure, everything's AI driven, right? Recently. So now Nerdio has a plugin to OpenAI, so in Azure AI. So essentially, if there's PII data that's through all your logs, they'll essentially scrub that for you and obfuscate that, as well as integration with their own Copilot to help you from a management perspective. So nice benefits there. Again, this is what it looks like from the marketplace. That's what it's essentially going to look like there. When you actually get it open and you get it configured, you'll see the integration point. So because it's a platform that sits on top, it gives you the ability to plug into multiple tenants as well as multiple Azure subscriptions. Essentially, it plugs into these resource groups as well as VNets and Intune, and then it lights up. Think of it like lighting up the environment, almost like ControlUp would light up an environment. That's what kind of Nerdio is doing there. So, which is really slick. A little hard to see here, but I think it's more my screen than your screen. But if you'll look, and you'll see all your host pools listed within Nerdio. What's really nice is it actually gives you a monthly savings and a per user cost on what actually is the savings because of all the auto scaling and optimizations, which is really slick. And you'll see this is just one customer that we work with. The peak cost is around 30K a month for they have much larger financial trading desktops, but they're saving essentially almost 9K a month because of the auto scale policies. One of the nice unique things is the self-service capabilities. So if you're in a scenario where self-service makes sense, think of like persistent or personal desktops. You want to give that user the ability to upsize their VM, to be able to do power management of their VM. That's something you can't do with Windows 365, right? Go ahead and auto adjust your SKU. Obviously, you can do that here. Being able to drive scripted actions. There's something called scripted actions, similar to what you'd see with ControlUp, that exists within Nerdio. So being able to call those actions as well as self-service app installs as well. And this is what it looks like. So basically on the individual host pool, you can essentially configure, start, restop, stop. Resize is a big one, right? Maybe you want to allow a developer to resize their desktop, but only allow certain VM SKUs. That's stuff that I've seen customers build custom portals for. This is all kind of built right into the platform, which is really nice. And then gives you the ability to reimage the desktop and or restore individual snapshots as well. Scripted actions, there's 50 plus in the library. You could build your own. This is just an example of configuring clipboard. You probably want to do that in like an Intune policy but this is just an example. Same thing with user installed apps. So they give you the ability to, Nerdy gives you the ability, Oz will talk to that around hooking into repositories from an applications perspective. It can allow you to auto provision those apps as well. So taking it a step further from a management perspective. And this is what the self-service portal looks like. If the user were to log in, it says Cloud PC. I just called it Cloud PC. This is not Microsoft Cloud PC, but it gives you the ability to control that Cloud PC or that desktop or personal desktop driven from the self-service portal, which is pretty slick. And the last thing is resiliency. Built-in DR from host pool DR is an option. We'll talk to that later. I don't want to spoil that, but around active, not necessarily a common scenario, but there's some capabilities there that it does enable. API driven, it's 100% out of band. So if it does go down, you can still broker and manage those desktops.
Yeah. And we'll go into quick deployment scenarios. What's annoying about my Teams popping up, it's actually Microsoft hitting us up about some of the cloud PC stuff we're doing.
Oh, is that what's going on?
Ironically, they're the ones interrupting our flow talking through Cloud PC.
Hit that, yeah. If you hit on focus mode, actually, that's not true.
I'm the presenter this week, so I tried to do it on my phone. It pops up on that. Anyway, so yeah, so the deployment scenarios again, AVD native, right? The control planes included, no cost, globally available, regional dependent, right? It's all there. You don't have to worry about anything. There's nothing you have to worry. It's kind of like any of these others that their DAS control plane, the management plane, is a PaaS SaaS surface a service. You don't worry about it. Hands off, right? So all that's there. You do have to have virtualization rights for any of the with AVD native and Cloud PC actually. The licensing for both of these is not included. So just know that little interesting fact, even on the Cloud PC side, you have to have the virtualization rights, even on that fixed SKU over there. So that, most all of you, but not every single one that we talk to, we have to always think about it, right? Business premium for the smaller shops, 300 and under. Any of these others for the bigger enterprise, this comes with it. If you're doing server OS, you're fine, right? It's all client OS where you get those special ones for the client OS virtualization rights. RDSH cal is like we've known forever for server OS, right? And then anything is extra, right? The cost, the log analytics, Azure Monitor tying into log analytics workspace, all that costs you extra to do so. It's nothing's included for that, right? The landing zone setup costs, everything running from your session hosts and all that, right? That's Azure costs that are involved that you have to plan for, right? That's the meter just keeps running. That just hits your bill every month. Anything and everything from that standpoint, right? So yeah, so what does it look like? This one kind of gives you an idea. Everything ties into the control plane at the top. Everything's dependent on Entra ID Connect. So when you move to one of these platforms, you have to have Entra ID of some sorts, right? So if you're on something else, we can chain it for MFA, for conditional access policy. We can do stuff there. But just know that everything here, when we're talking about Cloud PC and AVD, is dependent on Entra ID. So it has to be in play of some sorts. Azure files, Azure NetApp files for SMB purposes. We do a lot with Nutanix, so we're starting to be able to leverage NC2 on Azure for those purposes. But point being is you got to have some kind of storage for your profiles in the FSLogix world, using that, right? So, and as I spoke to before, you got to have your peering, you got to have your spoke and your hub going over to your transit. All these things have to be in place from an AVD standpoint. And then over here, I just want to point out, it supports all the major clients. So if you're coming for something that had like CWA, Citrix, it goes across everything, we're pretty much covered there, right? So in the Microsoft world, it's Windows app. It's still beta technically for some of the platforms, I think, maybe all. But it's a really nice app that they have. You subscribe to your workspace, you get in, that Windows app becomes your agent on your laptop to get into everything. And it does both Cloud PC and AVD, which is really cool. And then this is kind of an eye chart of arrows going all different ways, but just know that you have a few different things involved. You have Entra users and groups, application groups, workspace, host pool, and then your session hosts go in a host pool. And then you have Entra ID, like I mentioned at the bottom, right? So that's your identity. So you have your groupings, your app groups for remote apps, your desktop, obviously. These are basically the concepts around AVD and what that means.
Yep. So yeah, on the AVD plus Nerdio side, as mentioned, it sits on top as for advanced orchestration. So it's everything that we mentioned on the AVD side. But and it can be multi-tenant if required. There's kind of a specialized configuration for that. Um, you know, it's PaaS as we mentioned, not SaaS based, right? So you do have to manage that, but it is considered automated. Leverages the Azure APIs and supports multi-region, right? Azure Compute Gallery. So essentially, you can do image replication through, and again, it's leveraging. If you look at the Citrix world, there's MCS, but MCS, can leverage, the Compute Gallery from Azure, right, to basically, replicate that image. It's doing the same thing here, right? It's using the Azure constructs to replicate that image cross-regional when we talk about a DR standpoint. So it does give you that ability as well from a deployment standpoint. Yep. And then so if you look from an architecture standpoint, everything that Oz just mentioned, but what you're going to see as a difference is there's kind of a resource group that you'll create where you'll have things like, Azure SQL, Azure Automation, Azure Web Services, Key Vault, Log Analytics, Workspace, Application Insights, all that is kind of tied together. And that's basically sitting in a single resource group. And we'll talk through in a little bit about some deployment practices around that to kind of help. But that's generally what the architecture looks like on this side of the house. Now, very different on when we talk through native cloud PC scenarios. So we're looking forward to getting into that, and this is going to kind of drive into those use cases.
We run into the cloud PC deployment scenarios. We have the concept of dedicated. So dedicated was the primary one that they had, the first one. That's really the one-to-one persistent. The MHN, ANC, what he spoke about that. The MHN, Microsoft hosted networks. Think about that's hands off. That's just their network. You don't do anything. ANC, Azure Network connectivity connection into your environment. It has both of those are available for it. Contractors, developers, general purpose. The point being is it's full one-to-one persistent. Full feature support. So all the features that come out are always dedicated in the dedicated SKU first. And then it moves from there to where it's more limited into some of these, the front line.
Yeah, so on the frontline dedicated side, it really came out from like shift work, right? Call centers, different time zones, shift-based work. That's really where it made sense to go frontline. And I'll tell you what, the bang for the buck is pretty incredible because for a single license, you're allowing 3 users. And the key there is that we did this with this this little diagram here. If you noticed the detail, there's 1 orange user and 2 gray users because essentially you would get 3 desktops provisioned, each individually to a user, but only 1 can be used at a given time. But those are dedicated, they're locally persistent. Your app installs and things like that are all there, right? There's no FS logics, there's no profile management because it's a dedicated personalized desktop. But because it's frontline, you can only access it 1 at a time. If you attempt to access it, it's going to say someone else is using it. Now that kind of leads into a scenario, where we talk about concurrency and shift work. There are times where, hey, someone's late to work. Maybe they're a late riser like myself, and they're coming in a little bit late. Someone's leaving a little bit early. There is a concurrency buffer that Microsoft has and some calculations that they go into detail in the documentation that talks through like supporting that scenario. So you're not hitting like a brick wall, right? There is limited support from compared to what you'd have in dedicated mode. So things like being able to resize, because that is something that does come up. Maybe you have a 2x8 and you realize, I need a 4x16. You can do that as simple as updating a license and not lose your work. But you can't do that in frontline mode. And so that's something that is coming. And just like anything in the cloud, stuff moves quick. And so these features are coming quickly. Being able to move, we've seen that with customers where they actually move between regions. They're taking their PC and they're moving it across regions. Can't do that here, and cross-regional DR is not supported. This does support Entra and hybrid mode, and we'll talk through Entra join as well as hybrid, meaning AD joined and to Entra ID, and then both Microsoft hosted network and Azure network connection. Key across all these is client OS, right? Not server OS as Oz had mentioned. And frontline shared is tech preview. That's where it gets into this pooled model that we're all in the EUC world used to, right? And um, coming back right from the non-persistent world to persistent, this is a little bit of a shift back where, hey, maybe it makes sense where I want to have a pool. This is considered, there's no buffer. It's a limit. If I buy 30 licenses, I'm going to get 30 of these desktops. But it needs to be this scenario where you don't care about persistence. Spin them up, and essentially you're paying for them as a full license, but they're basically a pool-based environment. Reset after each use. And again, same on the limitation around the features there. So just a note on that.
Yeah, and there's a question here. Just is this cost effective from David for a few devices? And the answer is yes, it definitely can be. Just know the cloud PC is a fixed SKU, it's nice and easy, right? So it gives you that what you're going to be paying every month. You don't have to worry about it. I don't have to power it down to save costs and all that. No, you don't do any of that. So you're just paying your bill like you are for any subscription service at home every month. You know exactly what it's going to be. That's a lot easier, especially if you get a small footprint of users that need something. You don't necessarily then, especially if you're using the Microsoft hosted network and you don't need to connect anything on-prem, you got to keep it simple,
You can
sweet,
have
right?
one user and pay, was it $40 for a 2x8, 60
Yeah.
bucks for a 4x16, and single user is fine. Like it's when he's gonna hit on the Microsoft hosted network, he's gonna hit on that now, and you'll see why it makes sense.
Yeah, so that keeps it all self-contained, the MHN, right? So you don't even build out the ANC. We don't have to worry about a landing zone. So the upfront costs of building anything out, designing that solution is really the bare minimum. There's nothing, right? So it's just if you're just using OneDrive and O365 apps, SaaS web apps, things like that, you're not connecting anything on-prem. You don't have any crazy complicated stuff that you got to do connecting to other services. You can use the MHN, you can have a couple desktops, not a lot of upfront costs at all, right? So you can even do if you're a Citrix customer, bonus. It's kind of our bonus play, right? UHMC includes SPA. Citrix just unlocked the ability to use all that fun feature set that you have in there within a cloud PC without any additional licensing. So for our Citrix customers that are also like spreading their eggs across a few baskets, you can basically use their micro VPN within an MHN network to talk back to other stuff into your network. Let's say you do have that still keeps it zero trust, keeps the really small. There's no full VPN coming back. So you have that capability. Entra join only must be Intune managed for MHN. So that gets into the device identity side when we're talking about this. You mentioned hybrid join and so on and so forth. The device identity and what that looks like. These are Entra join only, meaning Intune has to be in place. So you do have to get familiar with Intune and using Intune. It's pretty intuitive as you get in there. I like Intune. I'm by no means an Intune master, but for cloud PC and what we use it for there and doing basic management and policy things and provisioning, it's pretty intuitive. So it has to be Intune managed. It matches that model of deploying physical laptops, like Shane mentioned. It kind of gives you that autopilot feel like for physical. Best for, again, SaaS, M365, OneDrive, so on and so forth, because it's all self-contained going out to egress to the internet. You don't have to talk back to something, right? So
yeah, and just like you said, like physical laptops. Think of that when we saw that contractor use case, you're all the logistics required to get a physical laptop to a user. You're paying that $2,000, whatever a laptop costs these days, right? You're paying that, you're shipping it out to them. In this case, you can spin it up. Maybe it's a temp worker for 3 months. We'll talk about life cycle, but essentially moving that user out of the group, it deprovisions it for you. You don't have to touch anything, right? So you pay for that user for 3 months and it's gone, right? You just threw it away. And it's a really, and just like a laptop, right? They're 100% disconnected to your network unless you VPN in or use some kind of app delivery service. Same thing on the Microsoft hosted network side. So on the ANC side, that's where things get a little bit interesting, right? And so ANC Azure network connection, there was a question that came in. around like, hey, I have Azure NetApp files today. I have Azure files. I want to integrate with that. You can do that. This is basically the leg in. And when we show, and I'll flip back and forth for a second here through this, and that's why I love these real time collaborations at the top. If you look here, basically you can see where it says customer Azure subscription, right? You'll see Azure Network Connection here. There's an arrow going down. You're essentially dropping a NIC into your subscription in a resource group, and now you have a construct, a network device on a VNet, on a subnet that can talk to on premises. It can talk to Active Directory for hybrid, can talk to Azure Network NetApp files, and so it gives you that ability to go back to your on-premise or another, your Azure environment, right? So you 100% can talk to things, database services, app services outside. ANC is your leg in without having to have the VPN. And all you're managing in your subscription, there's no desktops, right? You're just managing a NIC. And that's it. And there's not, it's just a NIC, right? But you have to manage the networking, right? You need your NVA, you need your user defined route to route that traffic. That's where that kind of comes in. Yeah, flexibility side, this was something that came up recently as we were talking through this. Your NIC essentially, your cloud PC can be in one region, and essentially you can have a region that's very close that has the NIC. And we'll talk through a scenario here shortly, why that, what that actually looked like. And this is the architecture that we just mentioned. I just wanted to show it what it looks like there. I'll talk through this relatively quickly here. This is just more about the, this is really good stuff. So those are the QR codes, just setting up SSO, enter, join, can get a little complicated, but this kind of walks through just trials and tribulations here, getting it all working. So really it's line of sight to the DC, DNS, TCP, UDP, needs to be set up, firewall rules, Kuros object, like just take note of this, and we'll go through kind of these items in one of these deployments. It really helps to have this ahead of time. So
just know there's a lot that's involved there. And these are the kind of gotchas that come up, especially when you're doing Entra join only, right? And you're wanting to do some of this special stuff, right? So
yeah. Go ahead,
lessons learned for us on that side of things. And then as we get into the lifecycle management, so we had a question earlier on, you were asking about, once I deploy these desktops, like on the cloud PC side, can I continuously update them? And the answer is no, not through like an MCS orchestration or what have you, especially on the cloud PC side. But there is a concept of a custom image that you can use to rebuild those, or you can start with a custom image. And then once they're deployed, the cloud PC, they're persistent desktops. So they're out there in the wild and doing their thing. And so you have to use other tools for that, right? For that purpose. And what we're going to show here is Nerdio can also front end these steps as well, the provisioning policy piece. And I'll let Shane kind of talk through the video here.
Yep. Yeah. And so we got this video here, and if I click next, it should start playing. Let's see. You might have to hit play.
I might have to.
Oh, there it goes. Yeah, so basically Intune integration, right? So you'll see it right there under Intune, under devices, you'll see Windows 365. You'll see across the top, right? You'll have all cloud PCs. So you're going to see all your cloud PCs along with the statuses, the provisioning policy, the image, Azure Network Connection, what region it's a part of, what user it's assigned to. You'll see your provisioning policies, right? And we're going to actually walk through creating one here. But custom images, that's what Oz just mentioned, your Azure Network Connection, your user settings, if you're going to configure those snapshots and backup. So when you go to configure provisioning policy, this is where you determine your licensing type. Are you going to be enterprise? Are you going to be frontline? You can go ahead and name it. Are you going to be Entra joined? Are you going to be hybrid joined? Are you going to be Microsoft hosted network or Azure Network Connection? And then you choose your geography. You're not building a landing zone, right? You're just determining where do you want to deploy this desktop. And then for simplicity, gallery image is great. It's out of the gate. It's ready to go. It's got Office 365. And because we're in Intune, if we have everything configured, it's going to come up like autopilot and start installing your apps. You have a naming convention. You can do scopes from a management perspective. Essentially assign it to an Entra group. That's it. When you assign it to your Entra group, you're dropping users in there. Provisioning policy picks it up and it starts building your desktops. You don't have to worry about actually going in and doing, MCS and all these different things. It's basically just dropping a user in a group. And so that's it's as simple as that. So now what you'll notice here is, is it still going? Okay. Yeah. So basically what you'll see if you go and click on a desktop, um, you'll actually get, it looks just like Intune at that point, right? You can see all the different things around compliance and policies, and you can resize it from here. You can re-provision it from an admin perspective. But we wanted to show as a little kind of sprinkle it in, enrich from a control up from an observability standpoint. If you have the browser plugin, you're going to see the control up data right in the Intune console. So being able to get a lot more observability on the metric side, event log information, memory, CPU, disk, being able to take remote control action, being able to deploy scripts, remote shell, all that's possible inside of Intune if you're a ControlUp customer through Enrich. So just FYI on that. Yep.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I don't. Yeah.
Yeah. So as we get into dynamic host pooling, auto scaling, stuff we've talked about, auto scaling is a huge part of the Nerdio story. They have scaling plan on the AVD side, but auto scaling really allows you to schedule your updates even, right? You can then you can change your disk size. You can do, as you can see here, your stopped OS disk type. This is one of those added sprinkled in features, save costs when it's stopped, downgrade to a standard HDD. You can re-image your hosts even to make it more like the Citrix world where they're re-imaged every time. It takes a long time though, by the way, doing that. And as you can see here, the scaling logic, lots of detailed points here of what you can do for pre-staging, draining, messaging, so on and so forth. So that's just a little bit of a touch on the auto scaling side, because really when you're talking AVD, that's where that comes into play. Cloud PC obviously is a 24/7. You don't worry about it. You don't think about it. But when it comes to AVD, you do have probably a bare minimum. You got to think about auto scaling, bring those up and down to save costs, right? So that's where that comes into play. And then, Shane will go into a little bit here about the
Yeah, so just on the quick side, just to kind of show like if you are a Nerdio, right, you're doing AVD, you do have the ability now to do unified endpoint management. So it's going to bring in through the Azure Graph APIs, Cloud PC, Intune. So you're going to see all the capabilities. So if you're not an Intune customer historically, you can actually manage those Cloud PCs directly through Nerdio, which we thought was great to kind of show that integration. So
yeah.
all those things like resizing Cloud PCs, being able to deploy policies, compliance policies, scripts, user experience, all that can be done through here. The one thing that they're still working on, like if you were to actually go and kind of build some policies, it's not as intuitive of what's there in Intune, but it's going to be very soon. So it does have that kind of native integration, and then also native integration as far as building, your provisioning policy. So the idea here and kind of the takeaway is it gives you the ability for, because not everyone's familiar with Intune, right? That was traditionally a whole separate team. And so maybe this is a nice platform for you if you have a mix of AVD and some cloud PC. This is a great kind of unified layer for both.
Yeah, one stop to go and do everything, right? Even the Intune management piece that we talked about.
Oh, there you go. I think you did the auto scale, right? Let's hit next.
Yeah, we did that one. So yeah, so some deployment tips right here. So we'll just quickly run through it. You can see those up here.
Yeah, take screenshot of those.
Yeah, we got the URLs. You don't have to hit them right now. There's hardening involved. You got to set up back. It's a PaaS service, but it's in your resource group, in your environment. So there's some things to think about in the back of your head as you deploy it. They make it easy, but just some things to do later on, right? But it pays for itself, and that what we're meaning by that is the auto scaling and then the management overhead and giving you the features and stuff that you don't have to go then develop your own automation scripts and Terraform and all this stuff, right? Bicep plans and all that. So it saves you from that aspect pretty quickly. But yeah, so there's just some tips here. Take some screenshots of that. From a patching and packaging standpoint, again, going into this becomes very important. Why is this so important? As we move to more persistent personal host pools, this is becoming more of a thing on this conversation. Cloud PC is a big part of this. Because it's all persistent except for the new tech preview thing, right? So it's all persistent world. Persistency makes it easy out of the gates because it's just like a laptop. You don't have to worry about the nonsense with personalization data and Teams 2.1 not working right and all the stuff that's in a pooled world or a non-persistent world you got to think about differently. So it helps with that, but then you have to have some ongoing your tool set involved for patching, updating, keeping them, keeping on top of stuff, right? Compliance. Those apps, they get old. You got to have some way of patching and mitigating those things. That's why this is becoming more of a deeper conversation. Intune can't do everything as well. Just know that. So anything with Cloud PC is always going to be Intune enrolled. AVD, not necessarily, unless you're doing, a hybrid. But Intune usually becomes part of the conversation, just de facto becomes part of it when you're talking Cloud PC and AVD. But it can't do everything. It's not great at app lifecycles. You're redeploying new builds of apps all the time under the app, for that. So then it really gets into some of these other pieces. So what can we use, right? Nerdio has the unified app management catalog we mentioned that supports the Winget community repository and Intune for deploying. ControlUp has what they call security access now control for compliance, which does the same similar thing. Using that agent, it can see everything on my physical laptop, for example, or a cloud PC. And it can see what apps we have there. Oh, the new build is out. This one has a CVE related to it. I need to patch for that, right? It can do OS hardening, Intune, app deployment. You got your update rings in there for the OS. The update rings are sensational in Intune for keeping on top of OS updates, right? And what does that look like? Nerdio is the unified catalog with a couple things in our lab, right? For being able to deploy apps similar to what you would have in Intune. And then from a ControlUp standpoint, you can just see here a lot of colors. But mitigation, CVEs come out. You got some things on an OS. BitLocker is not turned on. These kind of things. It can help with the compliance side of things. So that's that security X piece specifically on that. And then as you get into complete other third party solutions, we've been talking. So some of our customers, you're familiar with Patch My PC, or even Avante has their patch. When we start thinking about Intune and having a product that's very focused on application lifecycle and patching and hooking that into Intune, for example, this is where this comes into play with this conversation for that longer term strategy for what you can do there. Okay? So, BCDR with AVD, Nerdio Cloud PC. I'll just talk to the AVD one real quick, but again, it's globally available, but you do have to build that landing zone. So this goes back to our conversation before. You got to have that design properly built into it from the start, the desired resiliency. We do have the NME capability of what they call the host pool DR, which is more of an active very limited where that would be useful, honestly, with active regional, because you have all these other apps and stuff that usually you need to talk to. But FSLogix, Cloud Cache, is native to FSLogix, backup self-restore. So it's mainly Nerdio can help with a feature there, but for the most part, you have to design in your resiliency and design it properly, and you have to think about that versus W365.
Yeah. On the Cloud PC side, right? It's as we mentioned, leverages the AVD control plane from a resiliency standpoint. $5 add-on for cross-regional DR landing zone. Obviously, if you are doing ANC, you need to have a landing zone, an NVA, network virtual appliance, or firewall over there in that region for your NIC to have that traffic and traverse back. During failover, this is very key, right? In a cross-regional DR failover, it's a temporary Cloud PC. That data is not stored, it's not failed back. So that's one thing that they call out in the documentation. It's there. You can use it, get access to your apps, but your data set, anything that you change is not going to be saved today. That will probably change in the future. And then self-service backup, restore, reset as well on the dedicated side. And then one thing that was just mentioned on the tech preview side was the ability for what they call DR Plus. And essentially, there's a big change in the RPO and then guarantee as well, a potential guarantee. I think they were mentioning as well in the preview. So it's going from a 4-hour RTO down to 30 minutes, and from a point in time based on the recovery snapshot, now it's within 60 minutes on the DR Plus. So just announced, literally like yesterday. So not a ton of information on it, but just all how quickly it evolves. Observability side, we'll go through this relatively quickly. I mean, as we mentioned, this is our go-to. This is our platform. We've been a ControlUp partner for over 10 years, 11 years. I've been early advisory board member, also on their technical advisory board. They evolve so much more than VDI DaaS. It does physical endpoints now. It's very employee centric, so really kind of invented the DEX market. Endpoint security side now with SecurityX, application management, application visibility with SaaS apps now, as well as UCC on the communication side. So really all inclusive when we talk about managing the full estate in that last mile. Physical endpoint, cloud PCs integrated as well, and the VDI, and it all rolls up to that employee. And what's that overall experience look like? They're doing a fantastic job there on the observability side. So
Yeah. Yeah, and why do we need that? I mean, Azure Monitor Insights for AVD, right? But that costs extra. Log Analytics, Azure Monitor, W365 has built-in reporting, as you can see here. It has some stuff, some nice reports, some stuff, some data you can get straight from the Intune Admin Center that are just native. But ultimately, it's pretty limited when it comes to a product like ControlUp that's dedicated and been just sensational about end to end, and with them now having a huge focus with Cloud PC, for example, and have been on AVD side for a while. You're going to get a lot more from that type of product, but just know that you do have this capability in the Intune Admin Center to be able to see statistics, see some things, do some some reporting, and this is built in here. For Cloud PC, AVD, you have to pay extra for any and all of that, right? So, and then ControlUp the enrich extension, which Shane already showed. As you can see here, we've got it tied into that enrich extension can be an overlay onto a lot of different stuff, ServiceNow, Intune. So you can see that we've got that tied in.
especially now, it's any SaaS app, which is pretty nuts.
The SaaS app, right? Where you can just pop into the ControlUp for desktops, formerly EdgeDX, pop it over, show it like Shane showed it in the video. And then the Edge DX, which is now their control for desktops, like I mentioned, the true end-to-end visibility, Cloud PC, AVD. That's our eyes and ears. What that looks like. You can see up here the tab, Windows 365. That's the kind of new thing. Shows it all in here, real nice. Has everything right there in our one-stop shop, our dashboard there for Cloud PC. And as you can see here, even tying the two together, your Nerdio has ControlUp integration. Now, what this is for is just the agent. So it's really for Nerdio helping deploy, make sure the ControlUp agent is on our host pool, on our session hosts in our host pools and deployed correctly. So that's what that tie-in is here. It's pretty recent as far as that goes, but the two do tie in together, which is nice. So some real world scenarios that we'll quickly go through in our last few minutes.
Yeah, I guess what you want to mention, I guess, just because we're coming close to time, I guess, because we do want to, if there are other commitments, where this is going to be fully recorded, we got probably another 5-10 minutes, but we're going to be talking now about the real world scenarios. We're going to go through actually talking through real world customer scenarios for a few minutes, and we'll kind of wrap it up. So, but it is recorded, but so if you do have another commitment, but we're gonna keep rocking and rolling here, and then so we can finish out the recording and you'll see the video as well. So.
Yep. And Shane, you can go over this first one. Right?
Yep. Yeah. So this was a customer of ours that really needed graphic acceleration. They had kind of an antiquated these M10 cards that were on premises. And that's one of those things, right? You buy hardware, it depreciates, right? Deprecates or whatever. I always mess that word up. It depreciates day one, right? Essentially, you buy that card and it's already losing money, right? And new stuff comes out, right? And so they wanted the ability to basically grow that contractor base. And so we're looking at, working on a proof of concept with them right now, and a jumpstart. It's an offering that we have where we can essentially, stand up for a few days. We go through like a whole workshop and stand up Cloud PC and walk through it all and work with Microsoft to get licensing as part of that and everything. And so we did that for them, and they're looking to grow that to potentially 300 users. So the standard users on the graphic intensive workloads, they'll be using ANC because they're going to be sitting in Azure, and then they're essentially using ANC to get back to some of the data set as well. And those will be hybrid joined for contractors because they want it. And also contractors will be on the zero trust model as well.
Yeah. And then just it goes across all, right? Smaller one. We did a, library needed kiosks, and they wanted Citrix doing what Citrix is doing, right? They weren't a good fit for Citrix anymore, being smaller, moving them off to AVD. And this one is, Entra ID, hybrid join, pooled 111 kiosks. stations for a library scenario, right? In this case, and then moving on from there, we got this third scenario here on this one. This one gets into a larger global enterprise, right? So a lot of users, a fair amount of cloud PCs, multiple geos, ANC with Entra ID joined for cloud PC. But again, moving from Citrix, not liking Citrix, Citrix making Citrix moves, moving more of a heavy focus on Azure, like we talked about previously, and different DaaS platform. That was the scenario there for them. This one here, they wanted to diversify, integrate some of their international geos from on-prem Citrix desktop cloud PC. You're noticing a trend. A lot of these are going to be Citrix based on the just stuff that's happening, right? And then also the Win 10, Win 11, they're moving to Win 11. This is a natural way to do it. Desktop for that modern desktop management and management scenario. 300 to 400 of these Entra ID with MHN and growing. So several thousands is what this could grow to. And then cycle on there.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. This is just a customer that needed to migrate off DaaS. So they wanted to move away from, because of the additional commitments and multi-year agreements coming from the Citrix side. So, financial traders essentially moved over to AVD with Nerdio. It was 200 plus personal host pool. Today's traditional AD join, but potentially looking at, Intune for some additional integrated management. So the idea is just talk through some of the different scenarios, but it's all shapes and sizes, right? I mean,
Yep.
We have some very large customers that are growing into the thousands. And you don't have to be that size to be able to take advantage of this technology.
Yeah, and this last one's looking heavy push to Azure, migrate away from Citrix again. Not happy with it, but it's a mix. It was a mix of cloud PC. What worked, what was good for the design was a mix of cloud PC and AVD. And there's my timer, but yeah. So and that leads us to the cost exercise. So I'm going to quickly go through this, but the point being, before I throw that up, everything has a cost to consider when you're moving. So this one's interesting because it's an exit plan, right? From Citrix. Let's get off Citrix. Well, what do we got to consider? Everything. You got to consider all kinds of stuff. So as you can see here, AVD Server 2019. We're going to move to some Win 11 multi-session. We're going to use auto scale, but so we got a bare minimum that's going to be up, but we got some auto scale. So I split them 10, 15, 10 minimum, 15 are going to be scaled. You can see the instance type, go through all the calculations. We're going to use ephemeral disk because we can. Those kind of things come into that thought process. Well, that comes out to, $4,800 roughly per month, this per year, 58. And then Cloud PC, we got 50 of those users. Well, what we're using today for on-prem persistent, this is our specs, ended up being that $66 fixed price, right? So that's another $3,300 per month. 39.6 per year. So as you can see, we're starting to add up. And this is what Shane talked about earlier, where you start drawing out the cloud PC. What does that look like? What do we need? As far as the qualifying licenses, so on and so forth. So as it gets to those qualifying licenses of orchestration, well, in this case, we weren't going to do AVD native again, that Nerdio managed for enterprise. There's costs. You can pick and choose based on all the features. So there's a $6, a $10, $1 add-on for Intune management. That's basically it. List prices, that kind of stuff. MSRP, whatever you want to call it, it's discounting, but just know that you got to figure that in, right? So that minimum 250 infrastructure cost plus the licensing that comes into play. As you can see here, the cost. And then the Intune. Let's say you don't have a lot of those licenses already. Everybody assumes we have M365 or we have. Some don't. In this case, we're a Google shop. And so we were doing RDSH on-prem, RDSH licenses, server OS, not a lot of client. In this case, we got to add in some licenses now for that virtualization rights. So as you can see, we need Intune now with Cloud PC. Stuff we got to think about, right? So that's for another $4,500 per month, $54K per year. Based on this many users, right? In our case, we can get away with a cheaper one, maybe for a nonprofit plan, but you can see these blow up quickly for most in the enterprise space, even the business premium side of things, per user per month costs. And then, at least with Win 11 multi-session, you can reduce some of that reliance on the RDSH licensing. What does that equal in the end? Boom. That's anywhere from 170 to 210, depending on what the features and what Nerdio plan we build or use. So there's costs involved. So just know that everything has a cost to consider, and then moving from there, bonus round, Citrix.
Yep.
right?
Yeah, so for those customers that are still on Citrix and staying with Citrix and Citrix for the larger customers, the customers that are growing with Citrix, it is best of breed, right? It's unbelievable when they keep investing in the platform, the acquisitions of Device Trust, now Unicon, right, for endpoint management, essentially like an IGIL competition, right, part of the platform. Constantly building all this in, right? And so it's not that it's a bad solution. It's just that it's not right for everybody because not everyone's willing to grow or move with Citrix in that direction. But if you are, and it's expanding, the universal hybrid multi-cloud license is fantastic. They actually, again, added into it to basically say, hey, we know you're moving to cloud PC. We want to enable that. We're going to allow you to use all the HDX story in front of it from an unlimited number of scenarios at no additional cost. So if you're 1,000, universal hybrid multi-cloud licenses and you hire 5,000, crazy numbers, but you hire 5,000 contractors, they're not going to charge you 5,000 Citrix licenses. They're going to let you broker those cloud PCs. Now, 3 years later, they might come back and say, hey, we saw the utilization. Don't know. But today, it's unlimited. And they're allowing you to use secure private access from the MHN, Microsoft Hosted Network scenario, to get back to on-premises using the SPA platform as well, which is pretty big. But so things like session recording, profile management, the entire protocol stack, that's all policy engine, all part of it. You can do workspace app or to access it, as well as fail back to Windows app. So if Citrix goes down, you can connect through Windows app and use the AVD control plane. And essentially, it's all done through quick deploy. It's a matter of just dropping a user in a group, and it automatically pushes the VDA out. Take the user out of the group, it pulls the VDA off. So it's very integrated. And for fun, I through the HDX. I don't know if you saw it. Anyone picked up? It's the Home Depot HDX brand. So,
Yep.
anyways, yeah.
So then just wrapping up, we got
Wrapping
advisory
up, yeah.
service, right? We got jump starts. We got advisory services. These are the ones that are kind of targeted towards what we've been talking about today. Teams, AVD, Nerdio, ControlUp, UC. We got a new cloud PC jumpstart one. Just know those are on choicesolutions.com website. QR codes right there. But we have any kind of advisory service around this you could think of. We have our overall EUC advisory that Shane and I do. They're more specialized and cover everything. Talking through what we're talking through today. What's the best solution for us, from identity to the DAV solution to OneDrive to GPUs or no GPU, pooled, persistent, the whole nine, right? So anything you can think of, we talk through in these sessions are very specific to that. The Teams Jumpstart, AVD or Citrix in this case. So just know that AVD is included with this. For what we're talking about today, Teams is a monster in and of itself.
Yeah, these are all a couple days of services. They're not massive multi-week things. The idea is to get up and going quickly and get a feel for us, get a feel for the technology. That's kind of the idea.
Of course, we have the AVD Nerdio one as well. Again, what that looks like for that, you can see we have our choice solution optimized service that we wrap around that for that jumpstart. And then the new one was the cloud PC one that we threw up there.
Yeah,
right?
we've already done a couple of those, and they're super exciting. And this one's really designed as a workshop. We talk through a lot of what we talked through today. We get the Miro board out, we map out your use cases, we actually get it up and going, get some provisioning policies, get you up and rocking and rolling within a couple of days there. So yeah.
Again, please subscribe. Our numbers go up each time. It helps us out, makes us feel good. So if you haven't gone there, push subscribe, do so that we can update this slide for next time, like usual. Have a few more subscribers, but it's pretty cool what we're doing there, right? On stuff coming up to a place near you. Don't know if any of these, but if you're close to any of these, Des Moines, Kansas City, Tennessee, Winter Park, Florida, down there, we got some cool events coming. We're constantly, Ellie's over there constantly working on doing new events with us in our respective regions. Again, we got our events website there for those. Just take note of those. March Madness is coming. And that's really it. And again, the survey, right? So, since we ran over, again, we have I think we had a Zoom survey or something that will be sent
later.
Yep,
it'll be populated in the browser once we hit end.
All right, perfect. Yeah, so
awesome. Yeah. Thank you all for joining. Really appreciate it. Lots to go through. Went through a lot. We're happy to answer any questions. We can go a lot deeper in all these different areas and talk through it. So appreciate it.
Yeah,
awesome.
Thanks for staying with us.
Yeah. All right, everybody.